Alright, I know. You're already typing in the comments.
But Connery was the original. Craig made him gritty and real. Dalton was underrated.
Calm down, Martini Boy. We'll get to all of that. Here's the thing. I'm not saying Pierce Brosnan's Bond movies were the absolute best in the franchise, though let's be honest, GoldenEye is definitely up there in the Bond Hall of Fame. But Brosnan himself? He was Bond distilled to its purest essence. If you imagine 007 as a checklist, the tuxedo, the smirk, the one-liners, the aura of danger, the ability to order a drink and somehow make it look like foreplay, Brosnan ticked every single box without even trying.
The name's Bond. James Bond.
Now let's rewind a bit. The Bond franchise has always been about vibes. Connery set the gold standard with cool masculinity wrapped in menace. Roger Moore leaned into the camp, gadgets, and eyebrow raises. Dalton tried to take it darker, but the world wasn't quite ready for his no-nonsense Bond. Then the 90s rolled around and the Cold War was over. Suddenly, Bond was a relic, a character out of step with the times. People were saying he was outdated, irrelevant, maybe even finished. Step in, Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brosnan wasn't just another actor tossed into the tuxedo rotation, he was the chosen one, the only true fan favorite who actually got the role. Audiences had been whispering his name for years, long before the producers ever picked up the phone. See, back in the mid-80s, when Roger Moore finally hung up the Walter PPK, Brosnan was the man everybody wanted. He had the look, the charm, and just enough grit to shake off the lingering camp of the Moore era. The press was practically crowning him the next Bond before the ink on the casting sheets was even dry. But here's where things get tragic, or poetic, depending on how you look at it. Brosnan was slated to take the role after Moore, but television got in the way. He was locked into his hit series Remington Steele, and thanks to contractual obligations, he couldn't wriggle free. At the last moment, Eon Productions had to pivot and Timothy Dalton got the job instead. Now, Dalton wasn't bad. In fact, a lot of people today respect what he tried to do, a darker, harder, more brutal take on 007. The same thing Daniel Craig's Bond was praised for. But at the time, it just didn't land with audiences. The Living Daylights and License to Kill are remembered now as cult favorites, but in the late 80s, they underperformed and left Bond looking shaky. The franchise was in trouble, drifting toward irrelevance. And that's where destiny reared its head. After years in limbo, Bond returned in the 90s, and the producers came knocking on Brosnan's door again. This time, nothing was standing in the way. The role he was meant to play was finally his, and with GoldenEye, he didn't just step into it, he owned it. Brosnan walked into the role like he had been born wearing a tuxedo. He wasn't trying too hard, and he didn't need to reinvent the wheel, he just was Bond.
James Bond.
With a mix of Connery's cool charm and Roger Moore's smooth, witty humor, he added his own spice with the class to make you believe he could mingle with royalty, the edge to convince you he could drop someone off a rooftop without blinking, and the movie star charisma that made you forget the franchise was on shaky ground. Without Brosnan, it's entirely possible Bond wouldn't have survived the 90s at all. GoldenEye wasn't just a good Bond movie, it was a phenomenon. The opening bungee jump off the dam? Instantly iconic. The tank chase through St. Petersburg? Pure spectacle. And Brosnan at the center of it all, giving the role a confidence and charm that felt effortless. The film didn't just bring Bond back, it reminded audiences why they loved him in the first place. And then of course came the game. GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64 wasn't just another tie-in, it became one of the most beloved video games of all time. For a whole generation, being Bond wasn't about the movies, it was about huddling around a TV screen with friends, arguing over who got to be Oddjob, and discovering just how brutal proximity mines could be. The game kept the Bond legend alive long after the credits rolled, cementing GoldenEye as more than just a film, it was a cultural event. Now, were all his movies perfect? Absolutely not. Tomorrow Never Dies felt like Bond on autopilot. The World Is Not Enough gave us some great moments buried under clunky plotting, and Die Another Day? well, let's just say an invisible car wasn't quite the high-tech flex they thought it was. But here's the thing. No matter how outrageous the script got, Brosnan himself never looked out of place. He anchored the madness. He was the reason audiences kept showing up, even when the iceberg-sized CGI was about to sink the franchise again. Then came Daniel Craig. The studio looked at Jason Bourne, looked at Batman Begins, and said, let's do that. Out went the wink, in came the bruises. Casino Royale tore the wallpaper down and rebuilt Bond from bare knuckles and broken sinks. It worked. A new generation showed up. Grounded, gritty, edgy. Craig was a beast, built like a granite countertop, rough around the edges, the one Bond you would least want to pick a fight with in a stairwell. But in the remodel, some of the magic went missing. The signature spy toys got stripped back to trackers and laptops when everyone knew Bond's toys were half the fantasy. The effortless womanizing got dialed down into trauma romances. And no matter how hard the press tried to sell sexy Craig, his energy was more battle-scarred soldier than silk-smooth seducer. He was phenomenal at what he did, but it was a different flavor of 007. The glamour was muted, the swagger trimmed, the escapist fizz replaced with grit. Effective? Absolutely. Iconic? Sure. Just not the same intoxicating cocktail Brosnan poured. I can already hear Craig's fanboys warming up, but he's the closest to Ian Fleming's Bond. The gritty, flawed, realistic take? Yeah, I get it. In the novels, Bond isn't all tuxedos and witty one-liners. He bleeds, he broods, he carries scars. But here's the thing. That's not the cinematic magic we signed up for. On screen, Bond has always been larger than life, a glamorous, superhuman, wisecracking action hero who doesn't just survive danger, he owns it. The kind of guy who makes us daydream about hopping from Monte Carlo to Marrakech, ordering martinis without stuttering, charming every woman in sight, and pulling gadgets out of his cufflinks like it's nothing. That's the Bond formula that made the character immortal. Craig gave us a fighter, but somewhere in the process, the fantasy took a back seat. What's so special about Brosnan's Bond? He wasn't the cold, blunt weapon like Craig. He wasn't overly silly or cartoonish like late-stage Moore. He was the balance. He could seduce a femme fatale one moment, then drive a tank through St. Petersburg the next, and somehow you bought it. He was stylish, yes, but he wasn't untouchable. He bled. He struggled, but he still looked damn hot doing it. There's an aspect of elements you love in every Bond portrayal in his Bond. Brosnan's Bond wasn't just about the suits, the smirks, and the action set pieces. What really cemented him as the definitive 007 was the way he played off the supporting cast, especially Q and M. Pierce Brosnan's Bond had one of the best relationships with Q because it combined Q's exasperation with Bond's destructive tendencies, with a deeper, grandfatherly warmth and genuine respect, characterized by witty banter and a touching sense of camaraderie, particularly in scenes like the briefing in The World Is Not Enough. The dynamic evolved from the earlier, more antagonistic interactions to a more developed father-son-like bond, highlighting Bond's appreciation for Q's brilliance and making their scenes a highlight for fans. And his relationship with M, it was characterized by a strong, almost familial mutual respect and understanding. One thing we'll always associate with Bond is that sexy aura, and Pierce Brosnan was the absolute top of that game. He was no doubt the sexiest Bond due to his natural good looks and the way his films emphasized his debonair charm, leading to a character that was both sophisticated and exceptionally handsome, especially compared to other eras of Bond. He was known for his suave demeanor, great charisma, and a unique combination of classic Bond style with a more modern, somewhat vulnerable portrayal that many found appealing. It's no surprise that People magazine named him Sexiest Man Alive in 2001, but honestly, audiences had already decided that way before GoldenEye. And what's even wilder? Decades later, he still hasn't lost it. Even in his 70s, Brosnan can step onto a red carpet and make you think, without hesitation, that's James Bond. One thing's for sure, Pierce Brosnan's run as 007 was like a perfectly mixed martini. Smooth, sharp, and just dangerous enough to leave you dizzy. For me, when we picture James Bond, it's Brosnan stepping out of the shadows, fixing his cufflinks, and flashing that grin. But hey, That's my take. If you don't agree, drop it in the comments. Tell me who your favorite Bond is and why. Mission complete. But if you want to join the next operation, you know the drill. Like, share, and subscribe.